I'm Alyssa, 35, and 5 years ago I bought my dream home after my family cut me off completely. Never did I imagine they'd show up at my doorstep demanding I sell it to pay my sister's $180,000 debt. When I refused, they crossed a line I never thought possible, breaking in with baseball bats and destroying everything I'd built. What they didn't know was that I'd made a decision that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had to protect yourself from toxic family members. The neighborhood I grew up in, Portland, Oregon, wasn't anything special, but to me, it was everything. Middle-class homes with small yards, families who knew each other, block parties in summer. But inside our home, things weren't so picturesque. My parents, Thomas and Diane Williams, made it clear from early on that their love came with conditions, and those conditions always seemed to favor my younger sister, Melanie. "Alyssa, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, while I was drawn to colors, textures, and spaces, sketching room layouts. When I was just 10 years old, my parents pushed me toward practical paths. "Design is a hobby, not a career," my father would say dismissively whenever I shared my dreams. When Melanie decided she wanted to study business, my parents beamed with pride. When I announced my intention to study interior design, they frowned with disappointment. "That's not a real degree," my mother said. The contrast in their reactions burned, but I was determined. Throughout high school, I worked at the local coffee shop, then at a furniture store, saving every penny. While Melanie got a car for her 16th birthday, I got a used laptop. When college applications came around, my parents sat with Melanie for hours reviewing her essays. For me, they simply asked, "Are you sure this is what you want to waste your money on?" Still, I persisted. I put myself through design school, working 3 part-time jobs. My schedule was brutal: classes during the day, retail in the evenings, waitressing on weekends. Meanwhile, Melanie attended a prestigious private university with our parents covering every expense: tuition, apartment, meal plan, even spring break trips. During those years, I barely slept. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, wondering if it was all worth it. But whenever I stepped into a design studio, whenever a professor praised my work, I knew I was on the right path. The first major crack in our family relationship happened during my junior year. Melanie wanted to spend a summer backpacking across Europe with friends. My parents had already committed to renovating their kitchen, so money was tight. "Alyssa," my mother called one evening, "we need to discuss something important." That important discussion was them suggesting I loan Melanie $8,000 from my hard-earned savings. I was stunned. "That money is for my final year tuition," I explained. "Family helps family," my father insisted. "You can always take out more student loans." When I refused, the emotional manipulation began. My mother didn't speak to me for weeks. My father told extended family I was being selfish. Melanie left tearful voicemails about how I was ruining her once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I stood my ground, but the damage was done. A line had been drawn. After graduation, the recession hit and design jobs dried up. I worked wherever I could, building my portfolio with small projects, sometimes working for free, just to get experience. During this time, Melanie landed a corporate job through my father's connections. At family gatherings, they celebrated her success while questioning my choices. "It's not too late to get a real degree," my father would suggest over holiday dinners. Despite the discouragement, I managed to save enough to start my own small design business. A family friend, Robert, offered to help with the financial side. I trusted him completely. He was like an uncle to me. 6 months in, I discovered he had been embezzling money, draining my business account. When I confronted my parents expecting support, they instead questioned my business acumen. "This is why we worried about this career path," my mother said, not even addressing the betrayal I'd experienced. With my business in ruins, I had to rebuild from nothing. No family loans, no support system, just my determination and talent. I took a job at a large design firm working entry-level despite my skills, and slowly rebuilt my reputation. Everything changed when I met Sophia, a veteran designer, who recognized something in me that my family never had. She became my mentor, advocating for me, connecting me with clients who appreciated my vision. Within 2 years, I was handling major accounts and winning industry recognition. The day I closed on my house, a beautiful 1920s craftsman with original woodwork that I'd fallen in love with, should have been one to share with family. Instead, I celebrated with friends who had become my chosen family. The home needed work, but to me it was perfect. Every weekend, I restored another piece, designed another room, turning it into my sanctuary and a showcase of my professional skills. Little did I know that this house, my safe haven, would become the center of a family storm I never saw coming. The day my family cut me off completely is seared into my memory. It was April, cherry blossoms were blooming, and Melanie was planning her destination wedding in Maui. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope with gold foil lettering, clearly expensive. Inside was not just an invitation, but expectations: 7 days in Hawaii, staying at a luxury resort, participating in multiple events, requiring specific attire, plus a note about the registry starting at $500. The total cost would have been nearly $10,000. At the time, I was still rebuilding my career and financial stability. Every penny was going toward my business and saving for a home. I called Melanie, hoping to find a compromise. "I'm so happy for you and Jake," I began carefully, "but I need to be honest. I can't afford the full week in Hawaii right now. Could I come just for the weekend of the ceremony?" Her response was immediate and cold. "Either you come for the whole thing or don't bother. Everyone else is making it work. This is my special time." I tried explaining my financial situation, but she interrupted. "If your career choice isn't paying enough, that's not my problem. Maybe you should have listened to Mom and Dad." When I still refused to go into debt for her wedding, she hung up. 3 hours later, my parents called. "What is wrong with you?" my mother began, without even a hello. "Your sister is devastated. This is the most important day of her life. I want to be there for the actual wedding," I explained again. "But financially, I can't do the full week." "We've always known you were jealous of her," my father cut in, his voice sharp. "But to ruin her wedding is a new low." The conversation escalated rapidly. Years of resentment bubbled to the surface. I mentioned all the times they'd prioritized Melanie, all the support she'd received while I struggled alone. They dismissed every point. "After everything we've done for you," my father said, his voice shaking with anger. "What exactly have you done for me?" I finally asked. "Name one time you supported my dreams the way you support hers." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the words that severed our relationship. "If you can't be there for your sister, then you're not part of this family anymore," my father declared. "Don't call us, don't visit, you're out." My mother added, "Until you apologize and make this right with Melanie, we have nothing to say to you." The line went dead. I sat on my apartment floor, phone in hand, shaking uncontrollably. Part of me expected them to call back to realize how extreme their reaction had been. They never did. I didn't attend the wedding. I sent a gift that was returned unopened. I tried calling on birthdays and holidays for the first year. My calls went straight to voicemail. Eventually, I stopped trying. The silence from my family created a void that threatened to swallow me whole. I sank into a depression that affected my work, my health, my ability to connect with others. For months, I questioned my worth. If my own family could discard me so easily, what did that say about me? Finding a therapist was my lifeline. Larson helped me understand the toxic dynamics at play. "Your family operates on conditional love," she explained. "Your value to them is based on your compliance, not your inherent worth as a person." Those sessions were painful, but transformative. Slowly, I began to recognize patterns that had shaped my entire life: the scapegoating, the favoritism, the emotional manipulation. I wasn't the problem. The dynamic was. As I healed, I focused on building my chosen family. Jackie, my best friend from design school, became the sister I wished I'd had. Carlos and David, a couple who owned the cafe near my office, invited me for Sunday dinners. My colleague Zoe included me in her family holidays when she learned I had nowhere to go. Surprisingly, my career flourished in the absence of my family's negativity. Without their voices questioning my every move, I took bold risks with designs that won industry recognition. I attracted clients who appreciated my innovative approaches. My portfolio expanded, and so did my confidence. After 3 years of dedicated saving and career growth, I found my dream home, a 1920s craftsman with good bones but outdated interiors, perfect for someone with my skills. The day I got the keys, Jackie brought champagne, and we sat on the empty living room floor toasting to new beginnings. That house became more than property to me. It was physical proof of my resilience. Each room I renovated represented another piece of my healing journey. The kitchen, with its custom island, represented nourishment, both physical and emotional. The home office with built-in bookshelves celebrated my professional success. The guest room stood ready to welcome the people who truly cared about me. The crown jewel was my living room. I designed every inch meticulously. A hand-knotted Persian rug in soft blues and golds, anchoring the space, a custom coffee table I designed myself from reclaimed oak, a crystal chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across the walls on sunny days. The gallery wall displayed framed copies of my award-winning designs, alongside photos of meaningful moments with friends. This room wasn't just beautiful, it was symbolic. Every element represented a piece of my authentic self that had survived despite my family's rejection. It was in this room that I truly felt the peace that comes from creating your own sanctuary. 5 years passed without a word from my family. 5 years of holidays with friends of professional milestones, celebrated without parents to witness them, of building a life that was authentically mine. 5 years during which I stopped jumping. When the phone rang, stopped hoping for reconciliation, stopped defining myself by their absence. And then, without warning, my doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. After 5 years of silence, the last person I expected to see through my peephole was my sister. But there stood Melanie, her appearance dramatically different from my memories. Gone was the polished, confident woman who demanded a Hawaiian wedding. This Melanie looked tired, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a worn sweater. For a moment I considered pretending I wasn't home. My hand hovered over the door handle as my heart pounded. 5 years of building a life without them, 5 years of healing. Was I ready to risk all that progress curiosity won? I opened the door. "Alyssa," she said, her voice small. "You look great." I didn't invite her in immediately. "What are you doing here, Melanie?" She shifted uncomfortably on my porch. "I've been trying to work up the courage to come for weeks. Can I come in, please?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Watching her enter my home felt surreal. Her eyes widened as she took in the transformation I'd created. The careful restoration of original woodwork, the modern touches that respected the home's history. "Your place is beautiful," she said, genuine admiration in her voice. "Did you do all this yourself?" "Most of it," I replied, still guarded. "Why are you here after 5 years of complete silence?" We sat in my carefully designed living room, the very embodiment of the success they'd never believed I could achieve. Melanie perched on the edge of my sofa, looking out of place amid my peaceful surroundings. "I owe you an apology," she began, the words rushing out. "The wedding thing, I was bridezilla. I shouldn't have expected you to spend that much. Dad and Mom shouldn't have cut you off." Her apology felt rehearsed and incomplete. She hadn't acknowledged the years of favoritism or addressed why it had taken 5 years to say these words. Still, it was more than I'd ever expected to hear. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "But I doubt you tracked me down after all this time just to apologize." Her eyes filled with tears. "You always could see through me." She took a deep breath. "I'm in trouble, Alyssa. Serious trouble." The real story emerged in pieces. After working in corporate marketing for several years, Melanie had quit to start her own business, a luxury goods subscription service targeting affluent professionals. Our parents had remortgaged their house to provide startup capital. They'd also co-signed business loans convinced by Melanie's ambitious projections. "The first year was amazing," she explained. "We had influencer partnerships, glowing press coverage. But then shipping costs skyrocketed, vendors raised prices, and subscribers started canceling during the economic downturn." She'd tried to pivot then to downsize, but the business was bleeding money faster than she could patch the holes. Now, 18 months after launching, she was facing bankruptcy with over $180,000 in debt. "The bank is threatening to foreclose on Mom and Dad's house," she said, wiping away tears. "They're in their 60s, Alyssa. They could lose everything." I felt genuine sympathy for their situation. Bad business ventures can happen to anyone regardless of preparation. But as Melanie continued talking, the real reason for her visit became clear. "I saw your feature in Home and Design magazine," she said. "That beautiful spread about how you restored this place. I showed it to Mom and Dad." She paused, seemingly gathering courage. "The thing is, this house must be worth a fortune now, especially with all the work you've done." A cold realization settled in my stomach. "You want my house?" She flinched at my directness. "Not want, need. If you sold this place, it would cover the debt. You're doing so well now. You could buy another house. You owe us this, Alyssa." "I owe you." The audacity was breathtaking. "After everything Mom and Dad did for you growing up." "What exactly did they do, Melanie?" "They paid for your education while I worked 3 jobs. They funded your wedding while criticizing my career. They cut me off completely for 5 years. And now you think I owe you my home?" Her expression hardened, the vulnerability vanishing. "You always make yourself the victim. The fact is, you're the only one in a position to help, and you're choosing not to. That's selfish." "Selfish." I stood up, anger rising. "This house represents years of work that I did entirely on my own, without any support from any of you. The fact that you would show up after 5 years of silence and expect me to hand it over is what's truly selfish." The argument escalated quickly. Melanie brought up childhood slights, claimed I'd always been difficult, suggested my success was just luck, while her failure was circumstance. When she realized I wouldn't budge, her tone changed from pleading to threatening. "You'll regret this," she said as she stormed toward my front door. "When Mom and Dad lose their retirement home, when we have to declare bankruptcy, that's on you." After she left, I sank to the floor shaking. Within hours, my phone was bombarding with texts and calls from my parents. Their messages ranged from guilt-tripping to outright hostile. "After everything we sacrificed for you," my mother texted. "You always were a disappointment," came from my father. I blocked their numbers that night, but the peace I'd built felt shattered. The next morning, I called my therapist for an emergency session and reached out to my support system. Jackie came over with wine and ordered takeout. Carlos and David brought flowers for my kitchen table. Zoe checked on me throughout the day. "You don't owe them your home," Jackie reassured me. "You don't owe them anything." I knew she was right, but the guilt was still there, programmed deep from childhood. Was I a terrible daughter for not sacrificing everything to save them from their own decisions? The familiar pattern of questioning my own worth had returned, and I hated how easily they could trigger it. What I didn't know then was that this unexpected reunion was just the beginning. My family wasn't done with me, not by a long shot. In the weeks following Melanie's visit, the pressure from my family intensified in ways I never imagined possible. What began as angry phone calls quickly escalated into a coordinated campaign to wear down my resistance. The first alarming incident happened just 3 days after I blocked their numbers. I was meeting with a new client in my favorite downtown cafe when I spotted my father outside the window. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then he scanned the room, and made a direct line toward my table. "Mr. Harrington, excuse me for one moment," I said to my client, rising to intercept my father before he reached us. "We need to talk, Alyssa," he demanded loudly, not caring who heard. "I'm in a business meeting," I hissed. "This is completely inappropriate." "What's inappropriate is turning your back on family," he said, his voice rising. "Your mother can't sleep. Melanie might lose everything, all because you want to keep your fancy house." Heads turned. My client shifted uncomfortably. 5 years ago, I might have crumbled under the public humiliation, but not anymore. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "Now, or I'm calling security." "You've changed," he spat. "Success has made you cold." "No, Dad. I finally learned what healthy boundaries look like." After he left, I had to salvage my meeting, explaining away the interruption as a family matter, while feeling my professional reputation cracking. The client was understanding, but visibly uncomfortable. I landed the project, but only after offering a discount I couldn't really afford. The workplace ambush was just the beginning. My mother took a different approach, contacting extended family members and old friends with a distorted version of events. Suddenly, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me on social media. "How could you let your parents lose their home?" wrote my cousin Beth. "I always thought you were better than this," messaged my former high school friend Sarah. Each message revealed more of my mother's fabrications, that I was living in luxury while my parents faced homelessness, that Melanie's business failed because I'd refused to help with initial investments, that I was flaunting my wealth to hurt them. None of it was true, but the court of public opinion doesn't require evidence. The most concerning development arrived in my mailbox 10 days after Melanie's visit, a formal-looking letter on cheap imitation legal stationery. The document, clearly self-drafted, despite its attempts at legal language, claimed I had a moral and familial obligation to provide financial assistance. It demanded I either sell my house within 30 days or face legal consequences for abandonment and elder financial abuse. I took the letter to an actual attorney who confirmed it had no legal standing whatsoever. "This isn't just ineffective, it's borderline harassment," she advised. "Keep everything they send you. If this escalates, we may need to consider a restraining order." The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. I lost weight, struggled to sleep, found myself checking the locks repeatedly at night. My design work, usually my joy and escape, became difficult to focus on. Clients noticed my distraction, and I feared for my professional reputation. Then came the vandalism. One morning, I walked to my car to find "selfish" scratched deep into the driver's door panel. I couldn't prove it was them, but the timing and message left little doubt. That was my breaking point. I installed a comprehensive security system the next day, cameras covering every approach to the house, motion-activated lights, upgraded door locks, and a direct link to a monitoring service. The expense was significant, but my peace of mind was worth more. During this time, I had serious conversations with my support system about what to do. Jackie, always protective, advocated for a restraining order. "They're escalating lists. This won't stop until you make it stop." My therapist helped me work through the guilt and anxiety. "You're not responsible for solving problems they created," she reminded me. "Their financial choices are not your burden to bear." After much consideration, I made a decision that would ultimately change everything. It wasn't about spite or avoiding responsibility. It was about protecting myself and the life I'd built. I contacted my financial advisor and my real estate attorney to discuss options. Together, we developed a plan that would shield my home while allowing me to continue living in it. Jackie, who had recently inherited money from her grandmother, agreed to purchase the house from me in a private sale for a fair market price. We created a legal leaseback arrangement where I would continue to live in the house as a tenant with the right to buy it back in the future. The transaction was completed quickly and quietly. On paper, the house no longer belonged to me. It belonged to Jackie. My name disappeared from property records, replaced by hers. The money from the sale went into secure investments that couldn't easily be targeted by family claims. It was a drastic step, but given their escalating behavior, it felt necessary. What I didn't know was just how necessary this protection would prove to be. I told no one about the sale except my closest friends and professionals involved. To all outward appearances, nothing had changed. I continued living in my home, working on design projects, trying to rebuild the peace my family had shattered. I hoped they would eventually accept my boundaries and move on. I was wrong. So very wrong. The weather that weekend in April was unusually beautiful, warm sunshine breaking through after weeks of spring rain. I'd spent 3 days in Seattle meeting with a potential client about redesigning their corporate headquarters, the kind of large-scale project that could take my business to the next level. Despite the ongoing family drama, things were looking up professionally. I returned home Sunday afternoon, my mind still buzzing with design concepts. As I turned onto my street, a sense of relief washed over me at the sight of my craftsman home waiting at the end of the block. No matter what chaos swirled in my life, this place remained my anchor, my achievement, my sanctuary. That feeling evaporated the moment I pulled into the driveway. My front door stood partially open. The beautiful vintage wood splintered around the lock. For a moment, I sat frozen in my car, unable to process what I was seeing. Had I been robbed? Should I call the police immediately? What if someone was still inside? Before I could decide, movement caught my eye. Through the living room window, I saw figures moving around inside my home. Not strangers. My family. My father wielded a baseball bat, swinging it toward my bookshelf. My mother was pulling framed designs from my gallery wall, throwing them to the floor. And Melanie. Melanie was standing beneath my crystal chandelier, the one that had taken me months to find, raising her own bat toward it. Something primal took over. I flung myself from the car, racing toward the house, screaming, "Stop! What are you doing? Stop!" They froze momentarily as I burst through the broken door. The scene that greeted me was devastating. My beautiful living room, the physical manifestation of my success and healing, lay in ruins. The custom coffee table I designed was shattered, its reclaimed oak splintered beyond repair. My Persian rug was soaked with what looked like red wine. Picture frames lay broken glass scattered across the floor. The gallery wall that had displayed my professional achievements was half destroyed, with the remaining frames hanging askew. "Have you lost your minds?" I gasped, taking in the destruction. My father turned to me, his face twisted with anger I barely recognized. "You think you can just abandon your family, live in luxury while we lose everything? This is what selfishness gets you," my mother added, dropping another frame to the floor. The sound of breaking glass punctuated her words. Melanie stood silent, bat still raised toward my chandelier. Her expression a mixture of anger and something else. Satisfaction, perhaps. She'd always been jealous of my design talent, even as a child. "Get out," I whispered, then found my voice. "Get out of my house right now." "Your house?" My father laughed bitterly. "The house you refuse to sell to save your family? Consider this your wake-up call. Maybe now you'll understand what really matters." As Melanie finally swung at the chandelier, sending crystals raining down, I backed away toward the kitchen, fumbling for my phone. With shaking hands, I dialed 911, ducking out of sight. "I need help," I whispered to the dispatcher. "My family has broken into my home and is destroying everything. They have weapons." I gave my address, then added, "Please hurry." The dispatcher advised me to leave the house if possible. I slipped out the back door into the garden, crouching behind the shed. Through the kitchen window, I could still hear the continuing destruction. The sound of glass breaking wood, splintering, my mother's voice, rising in a tirade about ungrateful children. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens causing an abrupt silence to fall inside the house. From my hiding spot, I watched two officers approach the front door, while others circled the property. I heard the authoritative announcement, "Police come out with your hands visible." I stayed hidden until an officer found me in the backyard, still shaking uncontrollably. "Are you the homeowner?" he asked, and here was where everything changed. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm the tenant. Jackie Reynolds is the homeowner. You should call her immediately." The officer looked confused, but took down Jackie's information. By the time I re-entered through the back door, my family was being questioned in separate areas of the destroyed living room, looking bewildered at the turn of events. "These people claim to be your family," one officer said to me. "They say this is your house." "It was my house," I explained loud enough for them all to hear. "I sold it to my friend Jackie Reynolds 3 weeks ago. I'm now leasing it back from her." The look of shock on their faces was almost worth the devastation surrounding us. My father's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. My mother sank onto the ruined sofa. Melanie dropped her bat, the metal clanging against the hardwood floor. "That's a lie," my father finally sputtered. "She's making that up to get us in trouble." "We can verify ownership easily," the officer replied calmly. Within 20 minutes, Jackie arrived with property documents in hand. The police confirmed what I'd said. I was no longer the legal owner of the property. My family had broken into and vandalized a home belonging to someone they'd never even met. "I want to press charges," Jackie stated firmly, surveying the damage with horror. "Breaking and entering, vandalism, destruction of property. And I want full restitution." As the police began the formal arrest process, the reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on my family. They weren't teaching an ungrateful daughter a lesson anymore. They were facing serious criminal charges. "Alyssa, you have to help us," my mother pleaded as an officer prepared to escort her to the police car. "Tell them not to do this. Tell them we're your parents." "Mom, you broke into someone else's home with baseball bats and destroyed $40,000 worth of property," I said, my voice remarkably calm. "What did you think would happen?" My father's face had lost all color. "Call our lawyer," he said to my mother. "This is all a misunderstanding." As they were led outside, Melanie hung back looking at me with a mixture of anger and panic. "You planned this," she hissed. "You set us up." I shook my head. "No, Melanie, I protected myself because I knew you wouldn't stop. I just never imagined you'd go this far." After they were taken away, I stood in the middle of my destroyed living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my sanctuary, and finally let the tears come. Jackie put her arms around me as I sobbed. "We'll fix this," she promised. "Everything can be replaced." But as I looked around at the physical manifestation of all I'd built being reduced to rubble by the people who should have loved me most, I wondered if something's broken could never truly be repaired. The weeks following the break-in existed in a surreal space between nightmare and legal procedural drama. While my family was released from jail after their initial booking, the consequences of their actions quickly snowballed into something they clearly hadn't anticipated. My phone rang constantly with their desperate calls from the police station that first night. I let each one go to voicemail, listening to increasingly panicked messages. "Alyssa, you need to tell your friend to drop the charges. This is your family we're talking about." My father's voice, stripped of its earlier rage, now sounded old and frightened. "Baby, please. We made a terrible mistake. We were just so worried about losing everything." My mother, using the endearment she'd abandoned years ago, her voice breaking with tears. "This is going to ruin all of us. Is that what you want?" Melanie still somehow making this my fault. Jackie stayed with me that night, sleeping on the couch in my untouched bedroom, while the destroyed living room was sealed off as a crime scene. Police photographers had documented everything, and an insurance adjuster was scheduled for the following day. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Jackie reassured me, "about pressing charges or talking to them. Give yourself time to process." The damage assessment was staggering. Beyond the visible destruction of furniture and decor, the hardwood floors were deeply gouged, 2 windows cracked, and my built-in bookshelves partially collapsed. The insurance adjuster's preliminary estimate came to just over $40,000. "Even with insurance, there will be out-of-pocket costs," he explained apologetically. "Depreciation deductibles. The policy covers actual cash value, not replacement cost on many items." Jackie was adamant about pursuing full legal charges and restitution. "This isn't a family disagreement that got out of hand," she argued. "They came with weapons and a plan. They caused $40,000 in damage to my property." I understood her position. The house was legally hers now, and she had every right to protect her investment. But the thought of my parents potentially facing jail time still twisted my stomach, no matter how justified. 2 days after the break-in, I sat in a detective's office, giving my formal statement. The detective, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, listened carefully to the entire history. The estrangement, Melanie's demand, the escalating harassment, and finally, my decision to protect my home through the sale to Jackie. "You did everything right," she told me when I finished. "You took legal steps to protect yourself. You removed yourself from danger during the incident. You called for help instead of confronting them." "Then why do I feel so terrible?" I asked. She leaned forward. "Because they're family, and we're conditioned to believe that excuses everything. But it doesn't. What they did was premeditated destruction of property, and they're lucky no one was hurt." After recording my statement, she revealed something that shocked me further. "Your sister has a prior record," she said. "DUI from 3 years ago, and an assault charge that was pleaded down to disturbing the peace last year. Did you know about that?" I didn't. During our 5 years of estrangement, there was apparently much I didn't know about my family. This new information painted a picture of Melanie that contradicted the golden child image I'd grown up with. The legal process moved forward inexorably. My family hired an attorney who immediately tried to frame the incident as a family matter that got out of hand. The prosecutor wasn't buying it. "The evidence shows premeditation," he explained during our meeting. "They brought tools specifically to cause damage. They targeted areas of sentimental and financial value. And property records clearly show you weren't the legal owner at the time, which negates their claim they thought they were damaging their daughter's property." Meanwhile, the extended family grapevine exploded with conflicting narratives. Some relatives reached out with genuine concern, having heard about the break-in, but not the full story. Others sent messages dripping with judgment, convinced by my parents' version that I had somehow orchestrated the whole thing to punish them. My Uncle Richard, my father's brother, who had always been kind to me, called one evening. "I just wanted to hear your side," he said simply. After listening without interruption, he sighed heavily. "Thomas always did have a temper, and your mother enables it. But this is beyond anything I imagined they'd do." The insurance claim process moved forward alongside the criminal case. Adjusters cataloged every damaged item, photographers documented the destruction, and contractors provided estimates for repairs. My home became a revolving door of strangers examining the wreckage of my personal life. Through it all, my support system never wavered. Jackie temporarily moved in to help manage the parade of professionals and to ensure I wasn't alone. Carlos and David brought dinner several times a week. My colleagues covered some of my client meetings when I needed to deal with legal matters. The preliminary hearing came 6 weeks after the break-in. Seeing my family in the courtroom subdued and nervous in clothes clearly chosen to project respectability was jarring. My father, who had always seemed so imposing, looked diminished in a suit that hung loosely on his frame. My mother kept dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Melanie stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. They pleaded not guilty despite the overwhelming evidence forcing the case toward trial. Outside the courtroom, their attorney approached me. "Your family deeply regrets this incident," he began smoothly. "They were under extreme financial and emotional stress. If Ms. Reynolds would consider dropping the charges in exchange for a payment plan for damages, we could resolve this without further pain for everyone." Before I could respond, Jackie stepped forward. "They came with baseball bats to a home they no longer had any connection to. The answer is no." As we walked away, my phone pinged with a text from Melanie. "You could stop this if you wanted to. You're choosing not to. Remember that." I blocked her number immediately. The process of rebuilding my living room began slowly. The insurance company released initial funds, and I hired contractors recommended by colleagues. Each decision, paint colors, replacement furniture, new fixtures, felt weighted with extra significance. Was I recreating what was destroyed or building something new from the ashes? I opted for the latter. The new design would honor the home's history, but wouldn't try to replicate what was lost. Different coffee table, different chandelier, a completely reimagined gallery wall. Not because I wanted to forget, but because moving forward required acknowledging that things had fundamentally changed. One unexpected bright spot emerged during this period. A design blog heard about my story through industry connections and reached out for an interview about designing through trauma. The resulting article led to several new clients who connected with my resilience, plus an invitation to speak at a design conference about creating homes that heal. Amid the chaos, I was finding new paths forward professionally, even as I grappled with the personal fallout. What I couldn't yet see was that the worst was behind me and healing, real substantive healing, was already beginning to take root. 6 months after baseball bats shattered more than just my living room, I stood before a judge in a wood-paneled courtroom, preparing to address the court about my family's sentencing. The prosecution and defense had reached a plea agreement after my parents and sister finally accepted the overwhelming evidence against them. My father, mother, and Melanie sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped, avoiding my gaze. They looked nothing like the confident, entitled people who had stormed into my home with bats. My father had lost weight, deep lines etched around his mouth. My mother's hair had more gray than I remembered. Melanie's designer clothes had been replaced by a modest navy suit that seemed to swallow her frame. Their attorney had argued for leniency based on their lack of criminal history, Except for Melanie's prior incidents, their extreme emotional distress over potential financial ruin, and their expressions of remorse during pre-sentencing interviews. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I rose on shaking legs. Jackie squeezed my hand as I walked forward. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but standing there looking at the remains of my family, the carefully prepared words felt insufficient. Your Honor, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. 6 months ago, the people I once called family broke into what they thought was my home, with the explicit intention of destroying things I valued. The financial damage was significant, $40,000 of destruction in less than 30 minutes. But the emotional damage... I paused, gathering myself. How do you quantify having the people who should love you most in the world deliberately try to hurt you? I saw my mother wipe away tears, but I continued. I don't want vengeance. I never did. What I wanted then and what I want now is simply to be allowed to live my life in peace, free from harassment and destruction. Whatever sentence the court determines is appropriate. My hope is that it includes mandated therapy and clear boundaries that will protect both me and my property going forward. The judge nodded thoughtfully before delivering the sentence. 2 years probation for each of them. 200 hours of community service, mandatory therapy sessions, full restitution for all damages, and a no-contact order that prevented them from coming within 500 feet of me or my residence for the duration of their probation. The court takes the destruction of property very seriously, the judge stated firmly. That you targeted a family member makes this more troubling, not less. You're fortunate that Ms. Coleman and Ms. Reynolds have supported this plea agreement rather than pursuing maximum charges, which could have resulted in jail time. As they were led out of the courtroom, my mother turned her eyes, meeting mine for a brief moment. In that look, I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just regret, but a glimmer of genuine remorse. 2 weeks after the sentencing, a thick cream envelope arrived, reminiscent of Melanie's wedding invitation that had started our estrangement. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother, the first communication that wasn't a demand or accusation in over 5 years. Dear Alyssa, it began. There are no words adequate to express my regret and shame for what we did to you and your home. For years, I've justified our treatment of you with excuses that now seem hollow and self-serving. The truth I'm finally facing in therapy is that I failed you repeatedly as a parent. The letter continued, acknowledging specific instances of favoritism, dismissing my dreams, and the conditional love that had shaped our relationship. It wasn't perfect. There were still hints of self-pity, but it was the first genuine accountability I'd ever received from her. The most surprising revelation came near the end. Melanie has entered a residential treatment program for alcohol addiction. Her drinking escalated during the business failure, contributing to her erratic behavior and financial decisions. This doesn't excuse what any of us did, but it might help explain some of what you experienced. I sat with this information for days, discussing it in therapy sessions, sharing it with Jackie and my close friends. The letter didn't magically heal decades of damage, but it opened a door I had assumed was permanently closed. With the legal case resolved and reconstruction of my living room complete, I made another significant decision. It was time to buy back my house from Jackie. The legal protection of the sale had served its purpose, and with the no-contact order in place, I felt secure enough to reclaim full ownership. Are you sure? Jackie asked when I raised the subject. There's no rush. I'm sure, I told her. It's time to close this chapter completely. Besides, you never wanted to be a landlord. We completed the transaction with the same attorney who had helped us with the original sale, returning the house to my name. The act felt symbolic, reclaiming not just property, but my sense of security and autonomy. To mark this new beginning, I hosted a rebirth housewarming party for the friends who had supported me through the ordeal. We gathered in my newly redesigned living room, which now featured a sustainable bamboo coffee table, a modern pendant light installation that scattered light like stars across the ceiling, and a gallery wall that included both professional achievements and photos of my chosen family. I want to thank all of you, I said, raising a glass. When my biological family tried to tear me down, You showed me what real family looks like. You supported me without conditions, loved me through my worst moments, and helped rebuild not just this room, but my sense of home. Carlos raised his glass. To chosen family, the ones who earn the title through love, not just DNA. To boundaries that protect and strengthen, added Dr. Larson, my therapist, who had been a crucial part of my journey. To Alyssa, Jackie said, her eyes shining with tears, the strongest person I know. In the months that followed, I channeled my experience into something constructive. I established a small foundation that provides mentorship and grants to young designers from troubled home environments. The Sanctuary Project, as I named it, became a way to transform my pain into purpose. I also began cautiously responding to my mother's letters. Our communication remained written rather than in person, creating a safe distance while we navigated this new terrain. I made my boundaries clear. Any relationship moving forward would be on my terms, with respect for my autonomy, and no contact with my father or Melanie until I decided I was ready. My mother, to her credit, accepted these terms without argument. Her letters became less self-focused over time, showing genuine interest in my life and work. She shared updates about her therapy progress and steps she was taking to address the enabling patterns in her relationships. She never asked for forgiveness outright, perhaps understanding that some things must be earned gradually, if at all. As for Melanie, I received a formal letter from her treatment center. Part of her recovery program involved making amends. Unlike my mother's correspondence, Melanie's letter felt more like checking a box than genuine remorse. I acknowledged receipt but didn't engage further. Some relationships might never be repaired, and I was learning to accept that reality without guilt. My father remained silent. Through my mother, I learned he was complying with court-ordered therapy, but struggling to acknowledge his role in the family dysfunction. His pride had always been his defining characteristic, and apparently even criminal charges couldn't fully break through that armor. 1 year after the break-in, I sat in my living room on a quiet Sunday morning. Sunlight streamed through windows that no longer bore the cracks from that terrible day. The space around me reflected not just my professional skills, but my personal journey, from survival to healing to thriving. The most valuable lesson from this painful chapter wasn't about family betrayal or legal protections or even resilience. It was the profound understanding that boundaries aren't selfish. They're necessary sanctuaries that protect our well-being and dignity. That sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself. That forgiveness, when it comes, isn't about erasing the past, but about freeing yourself from its grip on your future. My home was once again my sanctuary, but this time with wisdom hard-won through fire. I knew now that I could protect what mattered to me. I knew who my real family was, the one I had chosen, and who had chosen me in return. And I knew that no baseball bat could ever destroy the strength I'd built within myself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Comment below and share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and healing. Remember, sometimes the family we choose brings more love and support than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps someone out there know they're not alone in their journey.